Right on my screen now, I can see Helen. Want to introduce yourself, Helen?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Helen Gray. I'm one of the clerks in Governance Services. I'm just here to assist members this morning.
And then I've got Natasha.
Hi everyone, Natasha Prosser, clerk to this committee this morning.
Then I've got Mark.
Hello, good morning. I'm Mark Sewards. I'm the Labour councillor for Farnley and Wortley. I'm losing my voice at the moment, so when I contribute, I'll try and keep it short.
I know that feeling. I've had a virus for a week. So. Councillor Harrand.
Pete Harrand, Councillor Roldy.
Lovely. Debbie.
Debbie Potter, co-opted parish council member, Shadwell Parish Council.
Right. Andrew.
Andrew Scopes, councillor for Beeston Holbeck.
Got Nicole.
Morning, Nicole Walker, head of legal service and deputy monitoring officer.
Eileen.
Good morning, Councillor Taylor, and I represent Chapel Allerton Ward.
Helen.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Helen Gray, one of the clerks for Governance Services.
Sorry, Helen, you just moved around my screen. Get to introduce yourself twice. Gordon.
Morning, everybody. The independent person for standards and conduct.
Thank you for joining us this morning, Gordon. And Andy.
Morning, everyone. Andy Hodson, head of Governance Services and deputy monitoring officer.
Excellent. Now, I've got one image on the screen that just says Civic Hall. Is there anybody in on that screen now? Okay, so by my reckoning, we've introduced everybody. If there's anybody who is off my screen who I haven't introduced, please announce yourself now. In that case, we'll get started with the meeting. And just to say, we are now being live streamed. Thank you to all members of the committee for attending remotely today. And apologies, I would have preferred for us to meet in person, but the weather has got the better of us. I think in the interest of safety for all members of the committee, it's better that we meet this morning this way. So if we turn to the items on the agenda, first of all, are there any appeals against refusal of inspection of documents?
There's no appeals, Chair.
Thank you. Do we have any exempt items?
There's no exempt items.
And I'm not expecting any late items this morning, but are there any late items?
No formal late items, Chair.
That's great, thank you. Do we have anyone that needs to declare any interests at this meeting? I'm taking that as a no. And do we have any apologies? I know there has been a last minute change to the meeting, so we may get some that arrive in late. We're expecting one councillor still to join us at least, possibly two.
Yeah, no other apologies to my knowledge, Chair.
Sorry, Chair, there is just, I had the conversation with him. Councillor Downs is probably unable to join us. So he's asked for his apologies to be recorded if he can't join us.
Okay, thank you, Andy. If we can turn then to the minutes of last year's annual conduct standards and conduct committee meeting, which is on page 5 of your agenda. We approve those as an accurate record. I think Councillor Scopes is nodding. I'm happy also to confirm that Councillor Taylor's approving that as well. Do we need to do a show of hands, Andy, or is there a better way of approving that formally, or are we happy just to go with the?
I think because this is a consultative meeting, Chair, I think we'll be recording the view of the meeting. I think subsequently we'll have to formally come back and approve these minutes at an in-person meeting. But it's useful to have the steer of the committee that they're content with the minutes as they are currently written.
Thank you. The only other matters arising from last year should be covered in the other items on the agenda today. So if we move on then to item 7, which is the annual report of the monitoring officer. And I don't know if officers want to briefly introduce the item?
Thank you. I'll kick off if I may, Councillor Mulherin. There's just a few issues I'd just like to draw members' attention to, if I may. Firstly, the content of the report relating to the Code of Conduct. We have got some amendments that are summarised in Appendix 1, which is the Monitoring Officer's report. Paragraphs 3 to 6 on page 15 summarise the changes that took place at the annual meeting, which were approved at the annual meeting following further consideration by General Purposes Committee. I'd also like to highlight on page 16, which is paragraphs 12 to 14, the content relating to registers of interest. Just to confirm to the committee and give assurance that all members that were elected and re-elected did meet their obligations to record their interest within 28 days of election. I'd like also to just highlight to members that the all-out parish elections that are taking place in May this year will be a fairly significant undertaking for officers to ensure that all of those parish members have their registers updated, but we have got plans and resources in place to enable us to do that. Page 16, sensitive interests, all but a small handful of members have got their home addresses redacted from the public register, and that follows this committee's interest previously and the monitoring officer's agreement to keep those home addresses withheld from the public. You'll recall this report brings to members a summary of complaints made against Leeds City Council members and also parish and town council members. This year there have been 7 complaints that have been assessed by officers compared with 12 in the whole of the municipal year last year. They're summarised in the table at page 19, and there have been 3 parish and town council complaints compared with 7 at this time last year. All of those complaints that were received have not evidenced a failure to comply with a member's obligations under the code. In terms of the complaints procedure, the monitoring officer is recommending some minor de minimis changes to the procedure. These are set out at Annex 1, starting at page 25 of your pack, and later I'll invite Nicole to summarise these in a little bit more detail. Just moving swiftly to the conclusion of the report, the independent person, as you mentioned earlier, we've gone through the process, we mentioned it in the minutes last year, of recruiting an additional independent person. Full council formally made the appointment of Claire McManus as an independent person to this committee, and she'll be formally taking on her role on the 1st of April. And then the last couple of things just to note. One is the LGA peer review and the feedback at page 23, which is very positive in respect to the council's arrangements. And the last thing I'd like to mention, and I should have mentioned it right at the top of my introduction, this is the report of the monitoring officer, and unfortunately Catherine Whittam is not well at the moment, so she does pass on her apologies to the committee. She's not well enough to attend today. If I could just now, Chair, pass on to Nicole, who will take members through those amendments to the procedure.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks, Chair. So the complaints procedure has been reviewed, and we are recommending some non-substantive changes to it. And it's really just to make it the layout of it clearer, and also to make sure that the language throughout is consistent. So that's at Annex 1 of your papers, and I think that's page 25 of your agenda. And you can see we've set those out for you as a red track changes, so you can see where the changes are. Some of it is just reordering, so where there's new paragraphs or what looks like new paragraphs, they have actually just been moved to a more appropriate part of the procedure. But if I can just draw members' attention to paragraph 6, there are all the reasons why we would look when we assess a complaint as to we need to let complainants know that where they wouldn't be classed as valid complaints because they don't actually, those things don't actually fall within the remit of the code. So we're just making that clearer by saying these things from A to J are not valid complaints and therefore no further action will be taken. And then we've separated out from J, from K to M, to say that these matters could be valid provided, you know, a complainant might want to complain about something to do with this, but if those things apply, then they will be held as, they will not be upheld as a complaint. Because perhaps if you take 6L, there's not sufficient evidence to substantiate what a complainant's alleging. So we wanted to make that change, and we propose that we do make that change because we do have a lot of the complaints that we receive that are simply not valid. So we thought we always send this complaints procedure out to complainants, and it might help them decide whether the issue that they feel to have is actually one that we can look at under the complaints procedure. I'm happy to take any questions if necessary, but hopefully that's self-explanatory.
Thank you, Nicole. I can see that Councillor Scopes has raised his electronic hand.
Oh yeah, thank you. I'm just looking at sort of, I think it's paragraph 32, which you mentioned in terms of the cases that have come up, and I guess the two that sort of stand out to me are number 5 and number 7. I guess alleged failure to meet obligations, openness and honesty, and alleged bullying and harassment. And I guess what I'd ask is, do we signpost towards appropriate authorities, I'm guessing the police, around harassment and bullying if we don't think it's a failure to comply with the code? Thank you.
Thanks, Kit. So that's on the table at page 19, Councillor Scopes, just for my clarity.
Yes, that's right. Thank you.
Yeah. It depends on the circumstances of the case. Now, I'd have to look back at those particular 2 case files to remind myself exactly what the circumstances of those were. But I would say that if there are other routes that are more appropriate, we will direct complainants to those, yes.
Thank you very much, Andy.
Thank you for that clarification. Any other members like to raise a question or make a comment? Can I at this point also welcome Councillor Cohen and Councillor Seary to the meeting. We have already been clear at the outset, we're live streaming this at the moment, and we've had to switch this meeting to an online meeting today due to the weather and difficulty organising another meeting that would fit around members' availability next week. So thank you for joining us. We've just gone through the annual report from the monitoring officer. I think you joined us quite early on in the presentation, so hopefully you've managed to catch all of that. But please do let us know if there's anything you want to raise. I'm not seeing any hands raised at the moment. I'd just like to refer to the extract from the LGA peer review. I think it reflects really well on the council in terms of the way in which the standards are embedded across the council and the relationship between members and council officers as well. I think that extract speaks volumes really about the approach that we take in Leeds cross-party. So I'd just like to from me as chair of the Standards Committee, place recognition of that on record. So as I'm not seeing any other hands, shall we move on to the next item? There was one other question I was just going to raise in terms of the appendix, actually. Bear with me. Annex 2. Recommendation around register of gifts and hospitality. And the question about whether that should be a cumulative figure or an individual figure, so £50 versus kind of whether there should be a declaration if it's more than one donation, cumulative fee of £100. Do officers want to just comment on that before we move on?
Councillor Herring, could you just bring me to which recommendation is that one?
Sorry, I'm on page 37.
Okay, thank you.
Council commentary in terms of recommendation 6 under the government response.
Yeah. Okay. Well, in terms of the commentary, so this just a little bit of context to Annex 2. So a number of years ago, the Committee on Standards in Public Life did a review of the ethical framework within local government and made a whole series of recommendations both to government and to local authorities in terms of adopting best practice. It took some time, obviously due to COVID and other issues, for the government to produce a response to the Committee on Standards in Public Life's recommendations. So Annex 2 provides you with the government's response along with a commentary from officers about Leeds City Council's position. So at the top of page 37, that's the position in Leeds. Members, of course, could make other recommendations for amending the Councillor Code of Conduct that has been adopted by the authority. Should that be something that the committee wish to progress, you could make some suggestions to that effect that could be then considered by General Purposes Committee and full council.
I don't know whether anybody else in the committee has a view on that. I think the suggestion is sensible one myself, but so I'll be retiring from council in a matter of weeks. That's probably a matter for the members that will be staying here longer term to determine, because it would have to go through the formal processes. Councillor Scopes, you wanted to comment?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think it's reasonable myself. I think there's a I think we should probably clarify what period the cumulative effect is for. My guess is it's in a year, would be my interpretation, and is nodding. But it might be worth in future, I'm not suggesting we change it now, but in future changes we amend it to be clear that it's per year. And I think it's just the only thing I can imagine is, and this might be me not quite having all the knowledge. My understanding is things like sort of meals, like in terms of ongoing business. I can imagine an executive member might meet with someone and have a meal 2 or 3 times a year, and that could start adding up. And I guess making sure you have all that on record is an extra administrative burden for a councillor. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not seeing anybody else wanting to comment. I think maybe that's something for the new municipal year in terms of members of the conduct committee as it's then established. But I think it's definitely something that would be good to consider over the next municipal year as the outgoing chair. So are there any other comments then on those items? If we move to item 8, which is the annual report of this committee. This, as we established at the start of the online meeting, it's become a consultative committee today. So I'm very much keen to get members' input into this. You've all hopefully had a chance to read the report in advance of the meeting. Clearly, the nature of this meeting means that it goes in a slightly different format to full council. Andy, I don't know if you want to just explain that.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Chair. The position, as you say, it's a consultative meeting. So the resolution, had you been meeting in person, was for the members to consider and approve the annual report. This is scheduled to be considered as an item at full council in March. So a way forward might be for members of the committee to be consulted on the report, but in terms of the presentation at full council, the report would then in effect be your report chair on behalf of the committee. I know there's a slight subtlety there, but you won't have a formally minuted resolution of the committee for it to go forward as a formal report from the committee. So it's a subtle way of paving the way for the report to still get in front of members in the timescales that members have previously agreed.
Thank you for explaining that, Andy. Councillor Scopes, so you've got your hand raised.
Yeah, thank you. So I raised I spotted a typo and I raised that with Andy yesterday, so he's already aware of that. Just the comment I wanted to make was on page 52, the third paragraph. I just think it could be a little bit clearer, because in the first sentence it refers to councillors as councillors and members. I'd suggest just using one. I don't really mind which one. I think councillors have been used throughout, except for that one members phrase. Just makes it easier for, I'm sure, the multiple public members that are reading this paper. And then the other thing I'd just say is all of them being assessed as invalid. I'd suggest also just adding in by the monitoring officer, something like that, just to be clear who's made that assessment, or monitoring officer in association with the independent member, or something like that. Okay, thank you.
They seem like really helpful and constructive suggestions, Councillor Scopes. I'm looking at officers, I think we should take those comments on board and amend accordingly.
Yeah, happy to amend. Very useful, thank you.
Thank you. And as previously covered in the previous item, the reduction in number of complaints, again, I think speaks well in terms of the membership of councils across the district. So again, I think that's worth noting in this report. We have already mentioned that we have appointed a new independent person in the course of the year to work alongside Gordon in his role as the independent person while they get up and running this coming year. Gordon's into his final year of office in the role as independent person, and very much like to thank him for the work that he's done on behalf of the council over quite a number of years now. I don't know if you would like to take the opportunity to say a few words yourself.
I can only say, Madam Chairman, that when you look at the size of Leeds City Council with 99 councillors in operation and the work that goes on across the city, I'm just amazed at the small number of issues which actually come before this committee. Yeah, and compared with some places, going back 2 or 3 years at a conference that I was attending, they're well into double figures of complaints that have been made in their areas. And I just think it's a huge tribute to the members of council that everything goes through superbly within Leeds, and there is not the comeback which there is in a lot of other places. Thank you for your kind remarks. And yeah, I continue with Claire when she's appointed on the 1st of April, and I shall give her every support.
Thank you very much, Gordon. That's really lovely to hear, and we're looking forward to working alongside Claire, because we know the skills and experience that you've got over many years will be invaluable to her in getting up to speed with the role as well. Thank you. Would any other members like to comment on the annual report? Any further suggestions for amendments or additions? I'm not seeing any indications that anybody else would like to comment. Can I then thank the committee for meeting at short notice online this morning rather than in person. hopefully it's meant that everybody has a safer, healthier start to the day in terms of not having to try and battle in the weather conditions that we have outside. Thank you for attending. Andy, do you want to say anything before we wrap the meeting up?
No, thank you, Chair. I think you've summarised it very nicely. Thank you.
Well, thank you all for your time, and look forward to seeing you in person. Those of you who'll be at council in a week and a half. Thank you.